So, the credit card thing is it's a slippery slope at times. At times it can be very beneficial to have, and it's...
Sure, and some people are lucky enough to just use them for convenience, which is great. But
they really can become a problem. So Harvey Warren is he is known as the drop debt coach. He's going to help. Yeah, don't drop debt. Drop debt coach. He's going to tell us how you can deal with the credit card companies, especially when you need them the most.
Mm-hmm. Well, the trouble with the credit card issue is that you're an amateur debtor and they're professional collectors. And a contest between an amateur and a professional never comes out well for the amateur unless you've got a good coach. I'm your drop dead coach.
Yeah, and we need him the most right now.
Yeah, especially in these times, people they're really on the precipice of, I don't know what word I want to say.
It is overwhelming at times.
It's very overwhelming.
I found myself in that position,
People are very down and out right now. It's very scary.
Did you know the average American household has $15,500 worth of credit card debt, consumer debt? Well, our consumer debt expert, Harvey Warren, is here. He is the author of the book, Drop Debt. And he is here to tell us how to successfully navigate credit card debt. It can be a tricky navigation process, a slippery slope, as I say. Is there a mistake people commonly make when dealing with this?
Well, most common mistake is people get paralyzed with fear from the phone calls and the red letters, and they do nothing. And that's the biggest problem.
Well, rightly so. I mean,
just denial. Denial.
Yeah, it's denial, but it's really paralysis. And people are just terrified of bill collectors, and they don't realize that they're making the problem worse minute by minute by not calling them back.
Well, that's an emotional response then. There's obviously when people start coming after you, you have an emotional...
Yeah, it's called shame. People are just shame-based when they get in debt trouble, and they just get completely paralyzed and unable to pick up the phone and call back their creditor. They can't get it into their head that all they need to do is call up and say, "Hi, this is Harvey. I'm having a problem. I lost my job. I got divorced. I got downsized. I can't pay this bill, but I want to do something. Do you have a plan for me? Please help me."
Can you help me?
Yeah.
Please help me. People, that's the last thing that people think to say to a creditor.
And you've helped a lot of people through this. We have Rachel on the phone now, and she has worked with you on this. Rachel, are you there?
I am. Hello.
Hi, welcome, and thank you so much for coming on the show. I know it's probably not easy for you to have to discuss these things because of, as we just said, the emotional impact it can have. But can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Absolutely. I had a store about a year ago. It was a boutique, and I had it for 7 years. And unfortunately, it really ran into hard times. I had to close it. And towards the end, I racked up a tremendous amount of credit card debt where I had been paying my credit cards down to zero prior to that. So I also had a really good credit score. So it was just like Harvey said, I was so ashamed. It was such a painful situation. I had never been in this situation before, and I just didn't know what to do. And I was getting all kinds of information pulling me in different directions. So it was really confusing, very anxiety causing, and it was difficult to even figure out what steps to take.
So you were using your credit cards to live on because you weren't generating income from your boutique?
Yeah, and with the boutique, you buy your inventory in advance. So not only was I not getting cash flow from sales, but I had to pay for inventory that I had purchased 3 or 4 months in advance. And I was paying living expenses, so where I had a zero balance. In 1 month, I accrued $15,000, and then another month, and then another month, and then I closed the store. But very quickly, between inventory and living expenses, I went from zero to like $65,000 in debt. It was crazy.
So just real quick, how would you describe, when the creditors began calling you, how would you describe those phone calls and their tone with you?
For me, it wasn't the creditors that called me first. I had saved some of that credit card money and set it aside to pay my minimums, thinking that I would figure out a way, because I was so ashamed that there was no way I was going to not pay. I was going to figure out a way to cover my expenses. And then I talked to my accountant, who sent me to a bankruptcy lawyer, and said, my accountant said, hey, you should just do bankruptcy, hit the reset button. Sent me to a bankruptcy lawyer who basically said the same thing. But again, I was so ashamed. To me, I was like, God, that's not an option. And I started looking at other options, and then I got connected with Harvey. And Harvey's like, well, have you talked to the credit card companies yet? And I said, yeah.
Harvey, what did you do in this case?
Well, I said that just like I'm saying, the important thing is to call your creditor up and say, here's my situation. Here's what happened. Let me be transparent with you. You can see my credit report. You know what my obligations are. I can't give you $1 no matter how loud you shout. I've only got 43 cents. Can you work with me? Do you have a plan? Can you help me? That's when the solution begins. Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. But I can tell you one thing for sure, if you don't ask, you don't get.
Wow. Can it be sort of an abusive relationship?
Well, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, many of the collectors have a terrible name because they get on the phone, and my joke is, what do you do when a bill collector calls you 50 times a day? And people say, well, you change your number, move, change your social security number, go to another state. The answer is call them back. And that's the key to the whole resolution process. You have to communicate with the collector. And if he's abusive, get his badge number, get his name, report him to a supervisor, get him fired. I get one fired one a week.
And Rachel, your situation now, are you still...
You're responsible for our unemployment rate.
Well, yeah.
Harvey Warren, responsible for the unemployment rate in America.
Rachel, just a cap on your story. You're where now in this process?
You know, I'm still trying to work it out with the credit card agencies. Harvey did help me when I was getting I was getting calls like 8 times a day. And it was funny because I would get a call and then there would be no one on the other line. I would answer, it would hang up on me, and then shortly after I'd get that call again. So he helped me deal with the credit card company to stop those automated calls where no one was on the other line, and to help me stop that. And then he's also...
Rachel, hold on. So, Harvey, you helped her actually negotiate with the credit card companies, and you got them to agree to formulate a plan for her. How did you do that?
I coached her on how to have the conversation. See, at the end of the day, the bill collectors don't really want to deal with a debt settlement company or an attorney or anyone else. You owe them the money. They want to talk to you. But you're an amateur debtor. And this is a professional collector, and it's not a fair match. If you've got the right tools and you know the right information, you've got to have a chance to have an outcome that makes sense.
But if it doesn't, the word bankruptcy comes up. And sure we panic when we hear that and are very afraid of it.
But sometimes
it's your only option.
It's your only option.
Really sometimes it's the best option.
Yeah. We want to talk about that option. It exists, and when it's actually right to play that card. Rachel, thank you very much for your call, and we are coming back right after this. Don't go away. The bankruptcy thing is... We are back with Harvey Warren, and Harvey, we left talking about bankruptcy. When is it the right time to play that card?
Well, there's a couple of times. First of all, when someone is in debt extremis and their creditors are uncooperative, then you have sometimes no choice but to press that reset button. Things have just become so cataclysmic that there's no recovering. You've talked to your creditors, you've asked for concessions, and they're either unwilling to give them, or your ability to pay them back is not sufficient to make them happy.
Perfect. You are here with Angelica, who is sharing. You're another client of Harvey's. Tell us your story.
Well, I got in debt because of medical expenses, and we had a trucking business which was devoted to construction. So obviously, with the market going down, we got in debt. We tried another business, import-export business, that didn't work out. And lastly, the husband walked out. So I was faced with no work, nothing. And
so medical bills, no work, divorced.
Yeah, on your own.
On your own.
So you choose bankruptcy.
Well, not quite.
Harvey guided you to that.
Yeah.
But how did you feel about that?
Well, I was very reluctant because I wanted to honor my dad. You know, I tried everything. I wanted to fight to be able to repay my dad.
Don't you think this is a really big misconception that people have about bankruptcy toward people who file bankruptcy?
Right.
That they're taking the easy way out.
Right.
But the people who file bankruptcy don't feel that way at all.
I've never met one person yet that said, gee, I can't wait to file bankruptcy. You know, people hate it. They really don't want to do it, but sometimes it's what you must do.
And there's repercussions to doing this. It's not like you just walk away. There's things that you have
10 years on your credit report and a lot of other emotional issues, but in her case, she had the perfect storm. Medical, family problems, you know, downsized business. It's just, at some point, you just have to say enough's enough, and the courts provide an outcome for that.
How do you recognize the perfect storm?
Well, she just did it.
Yeah.
Medical debt, divorce, you know, business failure, those are the trifecta. That's it.
But don't people want to hang on long enough? Because obviously you probably weren't, I don't want to file. But if these are the facts that are laid out, that it's just insurmountable and you have no way out, it's just, You put up the flag and say, I've got to surrender?
Well, I had like he mentioned, in my case was the inability to pay. I had a lot of debt and a couple of mortgages. And I mean, I tried, and I guess he saw my good spirit, and he said, honey, and no, you need to reset it and just live free. You know, you have 2 kids to fight for, and live free and in peace, so that you can actually pull it through and, you know, raise them up happily.
So is that how you felt? Did you feel at peace after you filed?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was able to save my home. I kept my car, and it was a just clean start.
Harvey, what if you're sued? What do you do in that case?
Well, it depends on why you're sued. If you sued because you didn't return the phone calls, that's a problem. If you're sued because the creditor just wants to sue you and you've been trying to work with them, that's going to be hard on the creditor. Judges don't like to see creditors in court when you've tried to work it out with them. They're going, no, 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 we want more money. And you go, well, I don't have any more money. The judges look very poorly on that.
Right.
So the biggest advice that we've gotten today is you have to talk to your creditors.
Yes.
You can't run.
Your lack of action is a bigger problem than your lack of money. That's the key.
Are there third-party services involved that we should be aware of?
Debt settlement companies and credit counseling agencies. Credit counseling does debt management plans for 100% of balance. 85% of Americans are so in debt right now they don't qualify for those programs. Debt settlement companies, government doesn't like them. The banks don't like them. I recommend that you read a book, get coached.
Read your book. Drop Debt. And if you want more information, you can go to dropdebtcoach.com.
There I am.
Right?
Well, if I know this is scary, debt is scary, but if you want a scary front yard and you want it to be the scariest one on the block, you better stick around, because coming up we have a pretty scary